All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for attending this Balanced Scorecard Institute webinar on how to measure strategic impact in a right now world. I'm David Wilsey. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Balanced Scorecard Institute, Strategy Management Group. I've been doing balanced scorecard and strategic planning for going on 16 years now, helping just about every imaginable type of organization with either strategy or performance measurement. So today we're going to talk about strategy or about performance measurement and strategy in this new world we live in. So what do I mean by right now world? This is actually a presentation I did, a master class I did at the ASP, the Association for Strategic Planning annual conference a few weeks ago. This builds on that presentation, and that was the entire theme of the conference. Right now world, strategy in a right now world. And when you looked through the agenda for the conference, you saw one phrase after another, like crisis and agility and working in a virtual world, and how to do strategy and performance measurement when we're all working from home, and the chaos and innovation and disruption and adapting, to the new world that we live in. In other words, we live in a world where it seems like there's a lot of change happening all at the same time, and most of the really serious stuff has to do with the way we've reacted to the COVID-19 situation over the last couple of years now. But there's also yesterday I didn't even add the stock market is having a hard time, and inflation, and the war in the Ukraine. We all have to adapt, and it's almost become a cliche in this world of strategy and measurement that we have to be good at this. But we at the Balanced Scorecard Institute are all about turning whatever you're focusing on in terms of strategy and measurement into a process, into a discipline. You want to do these things in a disciplined manner. Think about it as a process, and you can improve it. And so, how do we take this new world that we live in and make sure that we are applying agile principles to our strategy and to our performance measurement efforts, so that we are more adaptable, and we're not trying to plan for 5 years down the road with every effort that we make. Okay, so that's where we're coming from on this particular webinar. So what we'll learn, we'll talk through some practical techniques. For us, it's all about turning it into a step-by-step process for measuring and achieving results. We have a new framework that we're working on, the IMPRA model. This IMPRA framework, it builds on what we've been using in terms of the 9 steps to success for 20 years now, but it does adopt some of those more the agile principles and more of a ongoing adaptation into the measurement field. So that you all will be able to adapt your KPIs or OKRs, whichever framework you're using, on the fly in the face of this disruptive world that we live in. So what are the things, a lot of this is just cultural. So some of it is process, some of it is cultural. What do we need to do to create the right kind of culture so that we can improve our performance over time and adapt to all these changes? Okay, so the basic structure I'll go over some of the basics in terms of what do I mean by agility, what do I mean by agile, how do I apply those principles to strategy and measurement, and then what are the cultural impacts, and then what are some of the process changes we're talking about. Now, right off the bat, I just want to warn you, I am approaching this in a broad sense, measurement in a broad sense. And you will hear me mixing terms like OKR and KPI in the same sentence sometimes, balanced scorecard, and that's intentional because I'm thinking of this broadly, and I'm not trying to press or push one particular methodology over the other. To me, they're all very, very similar. OKRs are very popular now. What I mean by that is objectives and key results, and I'll go through a little bit of the basics on that here in a minute. Balanced scorecard is very popular. KPIs are very popular. The overlap between these three systems is very heavy. I mean, there's a lot. They're very, very similar. They're all designed to set goals. They're all designed to create alignment and measure progress and improve performance. This webinar is designed to sort of rise above that and talk about measurement in a broad sense. Because to me, because there's so much overlap, you really want to think of these three tools. The analogy I always use in my presentations is that it's like the difference between a stove and a grill and a microwave. They're very similar tools. They're designed to do roughly the same thing. Each tool has strengths and weaknesses. And if you're good at this, if you learn more about the tools and their strengths and weaknesses, you'll know when to use which one. Of course, everything that we're doing here this webinar is designed to promote our programs. If you want to know more about measurement in general, we highly recommend our KPI professional certification program. We offer that through the Center for Excellence in Public Leadership at the George Washington University. This is where this program is where we talk about measurement in general. We also have a similar program for OKR, a similar program for Balanced Scorecard if you're more interested in one of those particular methodologies. All right, so let's get started. What do we mean by measurement and agility? How do we apply agility to our measurement approach? And what we'd like to do is go back to look at Agile in general. Agile is a methodology generally associated with software development. And there was this thing called the Agile Manifesto that had 12 principles that were the basis of this thinking, that how do we make sure that we're more adaptable on the flies as we're designing software. We don't try to work out everything in advance and then just design that. We want to have this adaptable process throughout the entire software development process. So how do I apply those concepts to measurement or to strategy? And frankly, it's very easy. That's one of the beauties of principles, is that you can take this general concept and apply it very easily to strategy. And the first one is that as strategy and measurement professionals, we should be good at adapting to changing assumptions. We should be. Not all of us are. And unfortunately, we all spend a lot of time building out our dashboards and our measurements. And so when our strategic assumptions change, sometimes it can be very frustrating to think, oh, I did all that work and now I've got to change. I've got to redesign my measurements around a new desired outcome based on something. Everybody's working from home now, and that has impacted my something in my strategy. As a general principle, we want to be good and at welcoming and adapting to change. That's something that's not going to go away. We want our measurement approach to always be aligned with customers. We want to work closely with customers and help them, or interact with them enough that any key stakeholders in our process should have a voice in the process, so that we can react more quickly and deliver value early and continuously, and adapt over time based on what the customers or stakeholders are expecting from us. We should think of this as an iterative process. Okay, we're not just like in the software world. You don't write code for a year and then deliver a product. You deliver tangible, small, iterative parts. And so that is easily applied to the measurement world, where you can say every quarter we're going to set targets and we're going to see if we're making a difference or not. We're going to implement some initiatives and see if it's making a difference. If it's not making a difference, then we need to change course. We need to try something different. That concept of experimentation is very easily applied to the world of measurement and strategy. The idea that we have close cooperation and face-to-face conversations, the 9-step methodology that we use in the Balanced Scorecard side has long been based on this idea that we want to get as many people involved in the process so that they can develop their buy-in and they can develop their own understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And so this is nothing new to our world. You want to, in the same breath, you're talking about giving your strategy and your measurement development to the individuals that are going to be using them, rather than just having the executive team go off on a retreat and designing these and bringing it back and presenting it to people. You want to trust people in the development of strategy and measurement. And then, to me, strategy is almost entirely about focus. It's about saying, what are we not going to do? We are going to do these things, and we're going to focus on those things and keeping it as simple as possible. And so your best measurements, your best KPIs are almost always going to be focused on those simple few things that you're really trying to accomplish, rather than a long laundry list of to-do items, maybe. Okay, so we're ultimately trying to build strategic agility. Okay, so the co-author of the Institute Way, Dan Montgomery, is always talking about strategic agility. This idea that we're able to detect and quickly adapt to unforeseen changes in your organization's strategic environment. So what are some basic principles that you can use to make sure that you can adapt more quickly? One is you can have a shorter update cycle. Okay, we're not going to do a 5-year strategic plan with 5-year measurements and 5-year targets. We're going to have, every quarter we're going to revisit and adapt. We're going to emphasize getting things done and achievement of our more short-term goals, rather than trying to create this very complex alignment structure. You do want to have alignment. You do want to have objectives at different levels, but we're going to allow people in the short run to create objectives and key results, if you use that model, or KPIs and targets that emphasize getting things done rather than waiting until this very complex structure gets built out. We can update them on a regular basis without waiting for that cascading exercise to get to them. Sometimes we see organizations, they build an organization level strategy with KPIs, and then they spend years building out KPIs at each department level. And so in this case, we're talking about not necessarily waiting for that long, slow cascading effort to get to them before you get started and try to get some use out of the system. So therefore, you can create OKRs or KPIs on the fly. So that any meeting, any team, any small team can articulate what they're trying to accomplish and measure their progress without waiting for that slow process to get to them. Okay, and the idea is that we're creating better communications, better transparency. We want team members to share and communicate what we're trying to accomplish and what does success look like. And what we're aiming for is this principle that Jeff Bezos is getting to here, is that if you're good at course correcting, being wrong is less costly than you think, whereas being slow is going to be expensive for sure. Okay, you want to get to the point where you're adapting faster. And so whatever your strategy is, whatever model you're using, you're articulating it and adapting it on the fly as needed. Okay, so what does this look like on the measurement side? First of all, there are principles that you want to instill in your employees. If you're going to trust them to do that, to build out their measurements and use this system in a more iterative fashion, then you have to instill these principles. One is making sure that they understand that you want to articulate strategic intent before you choose measures. And we have this basic model. We have mission, vision, we build out strategy, and there are a million different strategy models you can use. The point is that you want to have your strategy articulated in some sort of an organized manner that drives what objectives you choose, and then ultimately what measures and actions you implement. So you don't start here. We have a lot of people call our office and say, I need help with measures, or I need help with my OKRs. They're a big mess. And a lot of times what people are actually saying is they have a big mess over here on this side of the screen. And so their measures don't make any sense to them because they don't have anything to align to. So make sure that this principle that we articulate strategic intent before we get to measures is understood by your employees. Make sure your measures are quantifiable. We define KPIs as in quantitative terms. They're critical indicators of success. We're talking about the number of something. We're talking about the percentage of something, the graduation rate. And it doesn't matter which model, KPI, OKRs, your key results in your OKR model should be talking about the number of something that's getting better at something. We're not talking about our task list. And unfortunately, we see a lot of strategy companies, or a lot of companies call us about their strategy or their measurements, and they say, well, we had a retreat, and we set our goals, and then here are the KPIs we created. And I look at their KPI list, and it's a list of tasks or a list of initiatives that they want to implement. That's not useful at all. That's not what we mean. So you want to make sure you instill this basic principle in all of your employees so that they can run with this after you launch. You're trying to encourage your employees to understand and focus on drivers of success. That the idea that if I'm working on this area over here, I have a leading indicator for a lagging result. This is a basic principle of what I'm trying to accomplish. I want people to understand that if we hold more of these programs, it should be driving down the population that smokes. And if that happens, it should be driving down cancer rates. So, whatever your employees are focusing on, you want them to be able to tell you what this story is. If we work on this, it's going to drive this result. And this is how we connect the dots. And then I've already talked about the agility a little bit, and how we don't want the complexity of a cascading effort to slow you down. And this is what I mean by that. When we cascade, what we do is we start with organization strategy. We say, what are our strategic goals? And those goals are based on some assumptions that we've made about our strategic environment. Then we design objectives, and then these objectives they're identified, they're mapped. They're also aligned with this strategy that is based on assumptions. Then we cascade that down into all of our departments, and we want each department to have objectives that are aligned with the objectives above them. That takes months, often, sometimes years. But then we do the same thing at the employee level. We have each employee sets, personal goals or personal objectives, and those objectives are supposed to be aligned with the objectives above them. So this process takes years in some cases. And so what the OKR world has been telling us for the last couple of years is that's too slow. What if these assumptions are wrong? These assumptions you made here turn out to be wrong. And I work in the software industry, and I have to adapt faster. I can't wait for this process to go, to this cascading process to go. We can't go through that again. We have to be able to adapt faster. Okay, so that's where the OKR model has come in, and it has become very popular because it's thought of as being a more adaptable and flexible model. Just that it's simple. So OKRs are used by organizations to set goals, track progress, all those same things that we see when we talk about KPIs. Unfortunately, there's a lot of overlap between these things. But where did this come from? It's very popular right now because Google was so successful with it. It's really based on management by objectives, a model that's been around for forever and ever and ever. But it's gained in popularity lately because it's thought of as being a little more agile. It's not as complicated. So in the OKR model, you've got objectives, which qualitatively describe what you want to accomplish, and then you've got key results that quantifiably capture or measure what you intend to accomplish. Okay, so you've got an objective. I want to improve the customer experience. And our key result here is that we have a 5% increase in our net promoter score by the end of the quarter. So you see you've got a measurement and you've got a target built into that same phrase. But it's the same measurement elements that we're talking about in the KPI world. We want to increase healthcare market share as our objective. We want to see a 10% increase in healthcare vertical sales by the end of the quarter. Okay, so that's the format you might see for an OKR. And the idea is that everybody in the organization builds out their OKRs, and everybody shares them with each other, and you adapt them every quarter or so. Okay, there are certain conventions that are emerging through this. Some people think of their OKRs as being more committed. In other words, I'm telling my supervisor that we are essentially going to hit this key result that I've identified. We are going to achieve this OKR. That's what I mean by a committed OKR. It might be something that's a little more task focused, and then you might have some that are more aspirational, and only 60 to 70% of those OKRs we're probably going to achieve because they're a little more of a stretch goal. And then one of the principles is that we share them transparently. If you work at Google, you can walk in and see what the chief executive officer is working on at any given point. You can log into the system and see what the VP of human capital is focusing on with their OKRs. And it's reported on a regular cadence. So usually you've got it, once a quarter, you sit down with your supervisor or you sit down with your small team and you redesign your OKRs. And one of the conventions in the OKR space that is not consistent in the KPI and balanced scorecard is you typically in OKR do not see cascading. It's thought of as that OKRs are aligned bidirectionally over time. Okay, and so the idea is you reset this every period. Now, so you might be sitting there wrestling. Well, what is the difference between OKRs and KPIs? Is there a difference? Again, there's a lot of overlap. For me, KPIs tend to be more ongoing. They tend to be something that I track. It's tracking something important, some key performance outcome I'm trying to achieve, and I track it over time on an ongoing basis. OKRs again, they're measurements, but they tend to be more focused on short-term goals. Okay, so maybe I work at this organization and I say, we've got these the web visits seem to be going down and the monthly newsletters are certainly going down. I've got a problem here and I want to tackle this problem. So I might set an OKR of saying I want to increase website effectiveness this quarter, and I want to increase my total web visits from 95,000 to 145,000, and I want to increase newsletter signups from 32 to 45. So I've got an objective, increase website effectiveness, and I've got these key results. Okay, and I can track my progress whether I'm hitting my key result or not. Is really more the way the OKR world looks at my targets. Okay, and I can average those together, and then maybe I have another objective that I'm worried about, and so I can have an overall score for my OKRs. The principle here is that it's really good at getting me to set goals. It's valuable to make sure that your employees are setting goals, short-term goals, and they're measuring their progress. So that's the value of using this kind of framework. You can still call them KPIs if you want. The principle is that we make sure that we are adapting on the fly on a more regular basis. There are some weaknesses to this OKR framework. We have found that there's a lot of chaos. I talk to a lot of companies that are doing OKRs, and it seems like a lot of people just don't know what to do to start with. You say, okay, everybody go build your OKRs. But they don't really, a lot of employees don't know what to do. Whereas in the KPI and balanced scorecard world, there's usually a champion that's managing things, and there's a filtering process to make sure that everything that we create sort of fits the same model. And I think that's lacking there. There's some OKR world companies don't have a shared vision, and they don't have anything to align to. You have a lot of employees creating to-do lists. They create way too many measures. And when I'm talking to them, I'm finding that they really do want to align to something. They want to understand what the organizational objectives are so that they can create their own OKRs that align with objectives. So a picture like this is valuable. I want to know what is the story of value creation for the organization. So this is based on balanced scorecard, it's a basic strategy map. But if I have a picture like this, I know how, what I should be doing. I can create my own OKRs. I can say, well, I contribute to this process efficiency story in what way. I can define my own objectives and my own key results that align with making this strategy a success. It makes it much easier for people. So one of the takeaways here is that you could, in theory, use these tools together. I've got OKRs, I've got balanced scorecard, and what I do is I use balanced scorecard and or KPIs at the organization level to articulate strategy and show that big picture, that picture of how we create value and create objectives that people can align to. And then at the team and individual level, I can create OKRs that are aligned with these objectives. Okay, so I use this to communicate strategy, and I use this to make sure that people are getting things done. All right, so then we've got, so I said those are conceptually what this is about. There's really two major areas that you need to focus on. And the first is culture. The second one is going to be process. And I'll come back to our new methodology towards the end. But culture, performance culture is really going to be super critical in terms of enabling people to make this happen and giving people the autonomy to be successful with this. It really does require a shift in planning culture. Okay, we're going to shift away from this idea that we have a top-down culture that the boss tells us what to do. That we're trying to get away from that, and we're trying to think in terms of giving people some autonomy to do what they need to do, but make sure they're aligned with desired outcomes. So that right there is saying we have to have the desired outcomes articulated somehow. We have to communicate those, but then we have to kind of get out of people's way and let them do their thing. Let them make things happen. We're going to stop thinking of this as a long-term static planning process, and we're going to start thinking of it as more of an iterative hypothesis validation exercise. We have every quarter we're going to stop and talk about, if we're using KPIs, what are we measuring? Did we hit our targets or not? Did we implement some initiatives? Are they making a difference or not? And do we need to adapt that every quarter, or at least on a regular basis? Some organizations, maybe quarters don't make sense. So, but the point is that on a regular basis, you're adapting. So as a result of that, we don't have this 5-year feedback cycle where we create a strategic plan or something along those lines, and we say in 5 years we want to be at X, and we don't, we wait until we get to 5 years down the road to find out whether we're making a difference or not. We're thinking of this as a regular, safe to fail experiment. A much faster performance cadence is the word I use in the agile world for, meaning the schedule that we have that where we revisit these things. This is all adapted from Felipe Castro. He's another one of the OKR experts. Really fantastic. He has a lot of great content in this space. You'll notice though that you don't see the word OKR on here anywhere. It's not really about OKRs. It's really about shifting your culture. Whether you're using balanced scorecard or KPIs or OKRs as the actual framework isn't really the point. The point is you're changing the way you're approaching this in a cultural sense. You have to help your employees. And I've seen this whether you're talking about on the balanced scorecard, KPI, or OKR side, you have to say, this is the framework we're going to use, and you have to teach them the skills to do this. I've worked with some really smart people who did not know how to define desired outcomes. They just didn't know what I was asking for them to do. And they start talking about their to-do list just almost immediately. You have to teach people the skills of saying, this is what an objective should look like, and this is what your intended results should look like. What kind of grammar do you use? It's as simple as that sometimes. And how do you visualize success? Because if you can get your employees, it's not, you don't want just the champion to understand how to do this. If you can get your employees to be able to visualize success and make it happen, then there's an exponential benefit to implementing this system, as opposed to only training that one champion and having the one champion know how to do this. Okay, so you're trying to teach employees to focus and think about things differently, look outside of their normal process, and using the same framework consistently, one or the other, the same framework throughout the organization to articulate what they're trying to accomplish. And this will be a challenge for a lot of your employees. And so that's going to be the first thing you'll want to overcome. Then you want to teach employees how to separate action from desired results. This is something we teach in all of our classes. And when you first start with people, they think it's just semantics. Actions are start, stop activities. They're designed to produce a particular deliverable. There's certain verbs that imply start and stop. I'm going to write a document. I'm going to create something. I'm going to develop a product. I'm going to design a website. I'm going to deliver or prepare or build, all these verbs that are listed on the screen, they imply that I'm going to start, I'm going to stop that action. And when I get done, I'm going to have this thing that I created or designed or whatever. But they do not imply outcome or change in state that I'm talking about when I'm talking about an objective or some higher level strategic outcome. So I can talk about actions in a simple sense, or I can talk about projects, which are actions that are coordinated, right? I've taken the world of actions, and some of them could be thought of as projects because they're coordinated actions designed to create a particular improvement. Or I could even think of some of those projects as being strategic. They're strategic initiatives. Those are the projects that have impact on our strategy. Okay, but the point is, everything on this screen are a means to an end, not the end in and of itself. And so you're trying to teach your employees to think like this, so that they don't look at their projects as their goal, as their objective. Okay, so you want to teach them that we're trying to improve web conversion. We've got a key result of 20% increase in web sales by the end of the quarter. My initiative or my action is to redesign the e-commerce page. Because when you first start working with your team and you say, go create your objectives and KPIs, or go create your objectives and key results, inevitably half of them are going to say, I want to redesign my e-commerce page. That's my OKR. That's my objective. But the problem is that redesign, and so the measurement is, was it on time and was it on budget? That's not really useful. You want to teach people to think like this, where that's the action I'm going to take. What am I ultimately trying to achieve? And if you can get your whole team to learn this basic skill, you'll be a lot farther along, and you'll be much more successful with this. Okay, I'm going to separate outcome, measurable results, and action. I'm going to teach them to connect dots. A lot of people want this, but they don't really know where to start. How can I connect the dots between what is our mission and vision, that question, and what is our plan? How do we align our operating goals with our plan, and how do we get teams aligned and prioritized and so forth? How do I create that alignment between all of these pieces? Because some of this is very high level. Some of this is being tackled by the executive team, and maybe I'm way down in the depths of an organization. How do I create this alignment? The point is, you're trying to encourage your employees to think like this. So when they sit down with their small team, they are thinking, how do I align? Well, what are we trying to accomplish in this small team, and how does it align with the overall objectives of the organization somehow? And from a performance measurement standpoint, we're talking about connecting the dots like this. I've got a strategy, maybe I don't call it, we call this a theme in the balanced scorecard world, but maybe you call it a strategy or a priority or a goal. Your desired results, it's operational excellence is the strategy. Our theme and our result is our high quality products delivered on time and profitably. There are a lot of objectives in the organization that might connect with this particular strategy. And it'd be great if my dashboard showed people how to connect the dots. I'm ultimately trying to improve customer satisfaction. Back in the operations side, I'm improving product delivery. We've got a sales team that interacts with customers. Can I connect the dots with that? I've got production measurements that a whole nother team is focusing on. And then we've got resourcing issues. Is there a way, this is obviously based on a cause effect or Ishikawa kind of diagram, kind of a concept, but is there a way that my dashboards could connect the dots for your employees like this, to where, it's clear what our strategy is, and it's clear what we're ultimately trying to accomplish, but there's all these measurements that should be aligned with each other and should be connected. So this is what I'm aiming for in terms of making sure my employees can do this. Another tool that we found is really useful. This is based on Christina Wadke's book. This is for all these strategy folks. Anybody who's interested in OKR should read this book, Radical Focus. It's written like a novel. It's an interesting story. But she's got this really simple tool that she uses to keep her team on track. Every week they have a meeting. They talk about these are their objectives. They've got health metrics. So even though she's a big proponent of saying I'm going to have one OKR, my team is going to have one OKR, and I'm not going to have more than that. She does have health metrics that they track over time. They keep their eyes on that. She's got an objective and a couple of key results they're focusing on. What are we going to get done this week? And then what are some things that I need to make sure that my team is aware of that they're coming down the pipeline? So the example that we like to use is in marketing. I want to improve marketing, and I've got store traffic. I want to increase that by 10%. I want to increase online orders by 10%, increase daily average income by 15%. Those are my key results. We've got some health KPIs we track, customer net promoter score, and so forth. I've got this confidence level that she puts in. This as the quarter goes through, you want to be communicating with each other as to how confident are we that we're going to achieve this by the end of the quarter. So this might be a moving target. It might start out at really low and change. If things are going well, we slowly increase our confidence level. We've got priorities that we're working on this week. We're going to finish the new ad copy and so forth. This is, it can be just as simple as a to-do list. And then we've got projects that we're going to work on over the next 4 weeks. Something as a picture as simple as this can be used to keep your team on track. So it's not just a matter of creating your balanced scorecard or your KPIs and having a poster that they put on the wall, and then you forget about it. It's making sure that you're using your performance information on a regular basis to inform the work that you're doing. And your team is not just talking about what are we working on in an operational sense. You're always focused on what is your objective, what are the key results we're trying to achieve in the short term that should be driving the key results, in the long term, or there are KPIs in the long term. So a simple tool like this can keep your team on track and keep your team focused, and that's really what this is about. Okay, so all of that was about culture. Now let's talk about process a little bit. The process of developing and adapting strategic measures. Of course, this is where we spend most of our energy. We help a lot of organizations with the process. And before I show you the new model, I want to just start right off by saying you have to manage expectations. Okay, a lot of times people will listen to a webinar like this. They take the KPI class. They go home and they think this is what's going to happen. They're starting out. They don't know how to spell KPI. They don't know what they're doing, and they think, oh well, by the end of the quarter, we're going to have KPIs that are all outcome focused, aligned, measurable, and perfectly implemented, because that's what David Woolsey said in his webinar, and that's what we're aiming for. But the reality is, there's a lot of moving pieces here, and the reality is that there's going to be, when you get to the end of that quarter, or maybe even the first year, a lot of your KPIs and OKRs or whatever model you're using will be milestone focused or misaligned, haphazardly implemented. But when I work with clients, what I see is that even if that's the case, there's usually quite a bit of benefit from doing this. You're getting your employees to think like this. You're making a transition. You have to realize this is a disruptive process, and it's going to take a little while before you can really get great at it. So don't get too concerned if it's a little slow. Think of this as a journey. Okay, there's certain principles that you want to focus on. So if just getting your employees to set goals is going to be a step forward for a lot of organizations, a lot of your employees are currently not setting goals. They just work. They just come in, they do their job. Getting them to think about what are they trying to achieve is going to be a step, even if they're just listing their milestones and it's not very aligned. Communicating expectations, there's value in that. Set deadlines. Man, that makes a difference. If you work with a team and you get to the end of the meeting and you don't talk about action items and deadlines, there's inevitably you're just going to flounder. But if you say, okay, we're going to do these 3 actions and we're going to get it done by next week, it can make a huge difference. Sharing and transparency as a cultural shift can really make a difference. Now people can make more independent decisions. They can do a lot more by themselves because they know, oh, that's what we're aiming for. That's what my boss is aiming for. So I can adapt. I can make decisions on my own. Culture of accountability, that setting deadlines, setting, we're going to, it just helps keep people on track, makes people get things done. And then celebrating success. You can't make this be about punishing people. It has to be about making people feel good about, even if it's just incremental success. All right, so I already mentioned a couple times now that we've got this new measure, perform, review, adapt framework. This is the IMPRA model. IMPRA, like the word improve, is the framework that we use to develop and implement performance measurements. Whether you think of them as KPIs, or it's very similar to our OKR model as well. We spend most of our effort with teams on the measure side, and this builds right off of the 9 steps to success model that we use on the balanced scorecard side. The idea is that we identify objectives, then we identify intended results, we build alternative measures, we select them using a disciplined process for selecting the right ones that we define and document. I think, and most of these steps over here, performance review cycle, we've had before, but we didn't organize it in a performance review cycle format where you set targets, you implement actions, you collect data, you analyze, and then you adapt. You report, share, learn. The adapting can happen quarter to quarter, and you just keep going. In some cases, you say, there are strategic assumptions we made that are wrong. The world is different. Everybody's working from home. COVID hit, whatever. And now I'm going to go back to my strategic intent. And we're going to adapt our strategic intent. We're going to change our objectives. We're going to change our strategy. Maybe it doesn't happen that often, but in the whole title here, right now, world implies that it's happening more today maybe than in go back 3 or 4 years. So this performance review cycle is something that we want to make sure that we do in order so that we can adapt on the fly to changing circumstances, or maybe we're reacting to the fact that what we're trying to do here is not making a difference. We tried a lot of improvement initiatives don't make a difference. We think they're going to, but they don't. So we implement something. We implement a new marketing campaign. Sales don't go up. Let's try a different one. Let's go on TV and advertise on TV. Let's partner with somebody. If sales continue to not go up, then we need to revisit what we're doing and try something new. Okay, this arrow comes back, reminds me that I didn't really touch on this, the launching of the program portion of the program. We do spend, when we work with teams, we spend a lot of time on this part. You don't want to have a false start when you're implementing a system like this. You want to engage leadership and make sure people understand why we're doing this, and make sure we understand who the teams are and who's doing what in the process, and which methodology are we going to use. Are we going to call these things measures? Are we going to call them KPIs? We're going to do it consistently. Whatever we choose, we're going to do it consistently. We're not going to let some teams do some things and another team use a different model. Consider automation, and then think through all those things that we need to do from a performance culture standpoint to make sure that this is successful. Okay, so that's the model. When we get to the end, maybe if anybody has any questions, I can revisit this. What does it look like in real life? I'm going to show you the agenda that we use for our quick start consulting services. And this is a model that we implement sometimes with organizations that they essentially want to do this themselves, but they're a little uncertain about how to get started. This is a program that we implement where we go through each of the steps, and we teach you a little bit about what the step is supposed to look like. We facilitate your team through the first stage of it, and then most teams, after they go through this, will be pretty comfortable enough that they can continue and finish it themselves. But you can see this is a 10 session program. We spend 3 full sessions basically talking about that program launch element. There, you got to work with the champions to make sure that they think through all the process and procedures. Work with your leadership team, make sure that they understand what this is about and what they're committing to. Make sure they've thought about change, how does change happen, and then make sure that they have articulated the strategic context that's going to be needed for the rest of these steps. We do some training, help them with KPIs, and then you move into the basic steps that we're going along the bottom of the screen of that process. Develop, document objectives, intended results, understand alternatives, select them, define, document, and then plan for, start thinking through the agenda that you're going to use on a regular basis for that performance review model. Okay, now what are you going to do to roll this out and communicate it? So usually, so if you're thinking of doing this yourselves, this is the kind of model that you'd probably be thinking about. These are usually online sessions these days, but you might be doing this in person. All right, so that is the basic process, the new process that we're rolling out right now. And we're just about out of time. Any questions? Let me see if I can find the Q&A menu. Okay, so Tom is asking about organizations having multiple tier 2 scorecards based on different business units. And yes, and that's getting at this idea. Let me move this over here. That's getting at the idea of cascading, and yes, we want to make sure we create alignment in the different units within our organization. I talked a lot about the agile concept and not cascading. What I mean by that is don't slow down the process. You can tell all of your business units to start creating objectives and measurements, whether or not, and you want them to be aligned over time. But you can do that without having this business unit wait 3 years before it gets to you. That's the key there. But yes, you want each unit to create their own. We're trying to instill these principles throughout the organization that if you're leading a business unit, you should be good at saying, this is what we're aiming for, this is how we measure success, and this is what we're going to do. A lot of questions about the consulting process. What I showed you is a 1-week program. And yes, we do have some that are related to balance. We have the same. We could do the same thing on balance scorecard, KPI, OKR, and then that's the quick start version. Where we just get you started. We do help organizations with the full implementation. That can take 4 to 8, 12 weeks sometimes to sort of get started, to get the system rolled out. How does the IMPRA model fit with the balanced scorecard framework? So if you watch one of our other webinars, you'll hear me talk about the 9 steps to success. We use the 9 steps to success to build and develop and implement a balanced scorecard. Step 5 of the 9 steps to success is performance measurement. We develop performance measures. So if we're doing balanced scorecard, when we get to step 5 and we start, you'll see exactly the same steps. Do our objectives happened earlier, but we're going to do intended results, and then we do design the measures, and then so those steps are embedded, so to speak, in the 9 steps. How does the BSI proposal fit with PMI project management and agile management approaches? I would say that the best way to say it is we've learned from those approaches, and we try to incorporate concepts, all of the same concepts that they teach in the agile world. We've tried to incorporate into this methodology. So we're doing the same thing. Most of our clients, frankly, don't want to switch to OKRs, and there's no real obvious reason to switch to OKRs if they're doing measurements and they're doing you're setting goals, you're setting objectives, you're setting you have measures and targets and initiatives, there's not any reason for you to just change the name of all those things to OKRs and reconstruct it as slightly different. But there is some value to saying culturally, what can we do different? How can we learn from this agile world and adapt on the fly more? How can we make sure that we don't let the cascading process become too cumbersome? How do we make sure that if our strategic environment changes, we have a disciplined process for pivoting and changing course? How do we make sure that what are the principles that we're going to have in place that are informed by the agile approach? Still, a few people are wrestling with the difference between OKRs and KPIs. I've sort of talked about that a bit. To me, they're just different labels for roughly the same thing. If you want to deep dive and eat any of those frameworks, you'll really know what what they are. But there's not a huge difference between calling them measures and targets and initiatives, or calling them KPIs, targets, and initiatives, or calling them key results and actions. The various consultants out there will all they'll push their methodology that they feel strongly about. But again, those agile principles really make a difference. But what you call the elements in your scorecard, I think that's sort of trivial. Yeah. So why to create the acronym OKR beside KPI when KPI may be applied? Yeah. So a lot of these questions are getting at the same thing. I've wrestled with that myself. I really wish that our field didn't have multiple frameworks that are so similar. To me, there are principles, but the actual acronym you use isn't all that important. How this method may be applied to portfolio management. Portfolio management, when we help organizations with portfolio management, it's usually in the prioritization sense. In other words, portfolio management is about looking at all the projects that we're trying to implement, and hopefully we're trying to narrow that long list down to the select few. And if we can connect them to strategy and say these things are connected to our objectives, and these over here are not, that can help with that, at least inform that conversation and say, maybe these objectives or maybe these projects don't go away, but maybe they're a lower priority. Man, employees, a lot of organizations are just dying for that. I'm being bombarded. I'm being asked to do X, for as a strategic initiative. I've got these operational initiatives that I'm implementing. There's a security issue, and I got to react to that. They're dying for somebody to help them prioritize and say, these are the things over here that take the priority. These are long-term priorities. These are short-term priorities. Of course, we got to react to that security issue. But having a framework can help inform that conversation. How can a holding company set KPIs that can cut across all the entities and employees are rewarded equally? Where does weighting score aggregating the various entities scorecards come in all of this? You're touching on a couple of different issues in the same question, Solomon. Holding companies. So what we do is any entity we're talking to, we say, we want you to answer the question, what does success look like? What are our objectives? And so each business unit within the holding company has its own strategy and their own, their strategy for success, their own customer value proposition, their own objectives, measures, each one of those units. When you come up to the holding company, you're talking about a group that is asking themselves, why am I governing these business units? What does success look like for us? Of course, there's probably, if it's a holding company, you're probably talking about there's probably financial benefits. There's costs that we're saving because we've got shared services that go across the business units. But the point is that the holding company has to answer that question themselves. What is their strategy? Why do they exist? What is their vision for these business units? And so you create your own, they create KPIs based on their articulation of what success looks like. But then you also talk about rewarding employees equally. To me, that's a very different issue. How do I use performance information to inform my compensation system? That's a much more challenging topic. It's something I'm always a little wary of, actually. I would rather you focus on creating strategic alignment and improving performance, improving transparency, trying to encourage people to share bad news. When performance is underreporting, you want them to share it. And if their bonus is based on that performance, they might not share it. You might be surprised at how ineffective that can be sometimes. Not saying it can't ever work. I've seen it work in some cases, but anyway, so that's like a whole nother webinar to talk about how do we reward employees based on performance. Your question also gets at, you have a lot of questions in that one question. You talk about weighting and aggregating. That gets at in some cases it makes sense to have like an index, a composite index, where I've got a series of measures. Maybe I'm trying to report to an external stakeholder, and it's rather than sharing 10 performance measures, it might be useful to create one performance index that groups them together and it weights certain things. Again, that's a very sophisticated ordeal, something that you'll want to do in certain cases. Some people unfortunately use that to cloud the message, to hide underperformance. And so again, just like the rewarding people, be wary of doing too much of that unless you have a team that can really think it through. More questions, a lot of questions about Agile. Do you think Agile ties neatly in the balanced scorecard? My approach is, again, as I presented, that there are principles. As long as you're thinking about this in terms of principle, it fits perfectly well. There's not a methodology out there that does not start with, first, make sure we all understand what we're trying to accomplish, align around desired outcomes. And the balanced scorecard is a great tool for articulating what we're trying to accomplish and telling a story of how we create value. How do these objectives align with each other? The criticism from the Agile world is that balanced scorecard can be slow, but there's not any reason why it has to be slow. That's just about how you implement it. You can change objectives as fast as you can retype it on the screen. And then, as long as you're not culturally shy about adapting, we have to adapt. I'm talking to my customer, and their expectations are different today than they were 3 weeks ago. That's an Agile principle, is that we're going to adapt on the fly. Frankly, strategic thinkers should be good at this. People who do balance scorecard, they're strategy professionals, they should actually be better at adapting on the fly, I think, culturally, than some of your other employees, I think. Questions about the quick start. Do we have, we can do it. The quick start consulting can be done on for any of the framework. So we have a balanced scorecard version of quick start, get you started, teach you the basics of balanced scorecard, and get your team started with the process, not necessarily finished, although we can do that too. Where's the alignment part in the MPRA model? That's a good question. That when we articulate strategic intent is when we talk through that process. When we create objectives, the objective development process, depending on where I am in the organization. If I'm at the top of the organization, when I create objectives, I'm creating objectives that will help drive my strategic results. When I'm in a department, I say, I want to create objectives. What objectives should we create that will align with the organization objectives? If I'm down at a team level, I might be saying, what objectives should we be focusing on that are going to align with my department's objectives? That's where the alignment occurs. We always want to focus on objective strategy alignment, strategic alignment, as opposed to saying, what KPIs should I focus on? And how do I create alignment between my KPIs? That's where some organizations go wrong, because then they're only trying to find measures that are derivatives of the measures above them, rather than thinking about the strategic intent. What is this? We want to improve the customer experience, and maybe we measure something at the organization level that makes sense at the organization level. But when I go into the department, I want them to focus on the the customer experience, not that measurement we defined earlier. All right, I see it's after 2, so we're basically out of time. So again, thank you all very much for attending the webinar today. We greatly appreciate it. Just please reach out, follow us on the website. Reach out to us directly if you have any more questions that I didn't get to. There was a lot of them I didn't get to. I'd be happy to answer anything via email. Thank you very much. Have a good day.